I am presenting the Göttingen State and University Library, which has one of the largest collections of Siberian and Central Asian literature in Germany, mainly in the languages of the indigenous peoples of Siberia and Central Asia. From 2019, we created a specialized information service for Central Asia and Siberia with the financial funding of the German Research Foundation. And this is our homepage, where you can find more information about us. We are trying to be the center for research on Siberia and Central Asia, but we are still at a certain starting point because it took us 1 or 2 years to get started. We also have large collection of old manuscripts, prints, and ethnographic material, which was sent from Siberia to Göttingen around 1780 to 1800 by Georg Thomas von Asch. So our collection also has one of the oldest shaman costumes. It's an Evenki shaman costume, which is in our ethnographic collection. This costume was probably made between 1750 and 1780, was collected by Merck and then sold on to von Asch, who sent it to Germany. After World War II, literature from Siberia and Central Asia was collected systematically in Göttingen, including school books. Our collection of Mongolian literature and Uyghur literature is one of the largest in Europe. We have more than 20,000 Mongolian titles and more than 7,000 Uyghur titles. But of course, we have also many books in Sakha language and other languages of Siberia. Now, the school books and children's books are only a part of this collection, but I want to stress how important school books are, because most of the time school books are thrown away. People buy them when the children go to school, and when they're out of school, they're thrown away. And many academic libraries don't care to collect these school books. Nevertheless, they give access to rare and dying language for students and researchers. For example, when I studied Siberian languages in the 1980s, we used Soviet textbooks, school books from the 1930s to get an idea of Nanai language, of Lamut, Evin language, Evenki language, and others. If you collect school books over many decades, then you see that they reflect the changes in script, in spelling, and in vocabulary. They also give insights into the contemporary society, and they reflect the changes in society. After all, the purpose of school books is to form the mind of children and young people. School books usually paint an idealistic and utopian society, a society the adult authors would like to build in the mind of the young generation. in the case of Siberian languages, a written language often did not exist before the revolution. And in the 1930s, Soviet linguists created a written language for the Even, Nanai, Evenki, and other Siberian peoples, and wrote the first school books to teach the native children at school. In some cases, like for the Kalmyk and Buryat, a written language existed, which was then changed to a written language in Latin and then Cyrillic script. The new script never followed the spelling and writing conventions of the traditional script, but had to be learned like a new written language. So the change between the traditional Buryat and Kalmyk language and the modern language written in Latin and Cyrillic was a complete break with the tradition. This is a book from 1933 for the Evin. It is interesting because if you see the pictures, they reflect the change of the traditional life towards Soviet life, the forming of kolkhoz, which were foreign to the traditional ideas of the Evin. Again, this is a text written in the same textbook in Evin in Lamut, and it shows that the first textbooks were written in Latin script. Only very much later the Cyrillic script was used. You see how useful these textbooks are still today for anyone in distant countries wanting to learn Evin. This is the representation of numbers, and they are doing it by representing the numbers by the moose, by reindeer. You have the number 1, Unum, Jur, Ilan, Digin, and so on, like in most Tungus language. Again, society changing in the early 1930s when the Soviets reorganized society, but also reorganized teaching. Before the 1920s, there were basically no schools amongst the different native Siberian peoples. They were introduced in the 1920s and 30s. This is a school book for the Kalmyk language, Kalmyk Keln. This is a school book from 1979, which I bought on the market in Elista, for example. It's difficult to buy these old school books. You have to ask a lot around if you are there, if someone still has old school books. Sometimes on the market, you can still buy them. This is a book from 1979, reflecting the society from 1970s, still Soviet Union. Of course, you have Lenin and you have the cosmonauts. Then the school books change after 1990. This is a school book from the 1990s, also in Kalmyk language, which shows the change, trying to change from the traditional, from the Soviet time, Kalmyk written language, which was written in a modified Cyrillic alphabet, going back to the traditional Oirat script, which was not used after the 1920s. That's for over 70 years. So even old people nowadays don't know the script. The change is difficult and isn't very successful at the time, but school books exist. And this is from a school book, again, showing the change of society. Many of the subjects of the themes are religious. The Kalmyks are Buddhists. And so many of the pictures, illustrations are Buddhist. They include a poem or a song written to memorize the Oirat alphabet. Again, the song. I also collected many school books from Xinjiang, where the Oirat live. Kalmyk and Oirat are actually one and the same. That has historical reasons. This is a Oirat book from Xinjiang in the old Oirat script. And again, you can see this from the 1970s. It reflects revolutionary activities. If you can read, it is a campaign against Lin Bao, who was a disgraced communist leader in the 1970s. You see school life in the 1970s in Xinjiang amongst the Oirat, where they have to raise their fist in the revolutionary fight against the enemies of revolution. This is from a school also in Xinjiang, taken in 2016 in October. It's a Kazakh school, and if you can see it, the school books used there are in Arabic script. From 2017, all school books in the native languages of Xinjiang, that's Kazakh, Uyghur, Tuva, and Shibo, and Kyrgyz, Tajik, were banned. So all teaching in school from 2017 has to be in Chinese, and no more school books in the native language. That may change again in the future, we do not know, but this was the very last opportunity then, end of 2016, to see the old textbooks which are not available now anymore. We also buy modern textbooks to finish my presentation. These are modern school books from Yakutia, from Sakha. Again, the cover reflects an idealistic family, a westernized family, or should I say Russianized family. It is not the traditional family of the Yakut, but Yakuts living in towns like the Russians live, a traditional family life with a father, mother, and children reading a traditional book, which again is a little bit idealistic, because even nowadays most Yakut people will spend most of their time either with a smartphone or in front of the computer screen. Still, these school books demonstrate the changes between old society and modern society. So I think it's important to collect them and just to document the steps of language survival and also sometimes of language death, though we do not know how the situation in Xinjiang will progress. But if school children are not learning their native language and cannot learn with textbooks in their native language, then the language will probably die within the next 2 or 3 generations. Thank you for your attention.